Hello, I'm Tom Davis. Welcome back to my channel. Um, Please, if you like the videos that I'm doing, and if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the button, hit the subscribe. Um, that way you can get notified each time I post a video up. We are continuing on with the grand narrative of the Bible. So last time we talked about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and Joseph ended up with the people of Israel, the Hebrew people, being moved into Egypt. God making a covenant with Abraham that he would make Abraham a great nation. And we finished off the book of Genesis. We're not going to be going through all the books as in detailed as we did with Genesis. It's just that Genesis really lays that much of a foundation for kind of covenant theology and biblical theology. Genesis being probably the most important um, book in the Old Testament because it is so foundational to what is going on with everything else. But we pick up now, and it's the beginning of the book of Exodus is kind of where we're picking up here. And the people have moved to Egypt, and they were treated fairly because Joseph was a favorite of Pharaoh's, but that Pharaoh dies, and eventually you get a new Pharaoh that does not remember Joseph. And eventually the Hebrew people become enslaved, and they're forced into hard labor of making bricks for the Egyptians. So now they're in slave labor being treated, and they came in peace, and they came in with the good favor of that Pharaoh, and now they are enslaved to the people, and they're kind of grumbling, and they're wondering what is going on. They're starting to think that maybe there wasn't a covenant. So as they're sitting there going through the slave labor, Moses comes born, and the Egyptians, they implemented a rule that if any of the Jews had a child, that the midwives, the Egyptian midwives that would help the Jewish mothers when they were giving birth, would, before the Jewish mother could, get her baby, they would take the baby and were supposed to kill it. Well, you have two Egyptian midwives to the Hebrew people, the Jews. So what you have happen here is one of the women is pregnant, and she gives birth to a son, and the midwives don't take him, they don't kill him. They tell they're not killing any of them, and when Pharaoh asks about that, they tell him that the Hebrew women are very vigorous, and before they get a chance, they have their babies. But anyway, so Moses is born. He's a little baby. The mother ends up making like a basket, and made it so it would float, and puts it in the water and sends it off and tells her sister, or her daughter, so it would be Moses's older sister, to watch the basket. The basket goes there. Moses is raised with the Egyptian royal family because who finds it? Pharaoh's daughter. And after a while, Moses starts to identify with the Hebrew people because he's Hebrew, and he defends one of the Hebrew people, kills an Egyptian, hides the body, and the next day, two men are fighting, and Moses tries to break up the fight, and they kind of turn on Moses. They say, ask him if he's going to kill them the same way that he killed the Egyptian. So Moses gets scared because that could be a death sentence for him. So he runs off. He spends time in the wilderness where, he has a wife, spends time in the wilderness. God reveals himself to Moses, and through the fire in the bush, as Moses was out herding sheep for his father-in-law, and So God tells Moses to go back to the people, and that he's going to use him to get people out, bring the people out of Egypt. And Moses is scared, so Moses doesn't want to go do that. Moses keeps making excuses. I can't really do that. I'm not a good speaker. I mean, what am I going to say? They're not going to listen to me. And God keeps giving him an answer. And finally, God basically tells him to throw a stick down, and when he throws a staff down, it turns into a snake. Pick it up. He says, "This is what you will do, and you will meet your brother Aaron, and Aaron will speak for you, but you will not speak to Moses." So Aaron is now like a go-between between Moses and Pharaoh. And so as they're doing this, they wind up going in. They have this 10 plagues. I'm not going to list all of them, but some of them are like all the water, including the Nile, turns to blood. You have a plague of frogs, where all these frogs come in and are so thick throughout the land. You have locusts come in and eat all the crops. You've got the cattle dying, which cattle were. And interesting thing is, each of these plagues is connected to an Egyptian god. So it's almost like God is killing these Egyptian deities, or at least destroying them, taking their power from them. And at least that's what it would have looked like in the eyes of the Egyptians, that God keeps destroying these deities. The Hebrew God is more powerful than all the Egyptian gods, is ultimately what you come to do. And you come in, and now, after you've gone through these 10 curses, God says there's going to be one more, and you have the Passover. And the first Passover, and this is in Exodus 12, verses 1 through 28. And God tells Moses, he says, you go, you talk to all the Hebrew people. You tell them they're to kill a lamb, a spotless lamb, and they're, to cook it. And they kill the lamb, slaughter it, drain its blood. You mark your doorpost with the blood. When you mark your doorpost with the blood, the angel of death that God is sending will see the blood and know that the house is covered, and will pass over the house. So they do that. The Egyptians don't. The Egyptians wake up the next morning. All the firstborn sons of all the Egyptian families are dead. And so the Hebrews are protected from the plague because of the blood of a lamb on the doorpost that God commanded them to do. The Egyptians do not have that. And this is the final straw, because Pharaoh kept playing a game with Moses, where Pharaoh would come in and say, Moses would come in and he would send a plague, and Pharaoh would send him away, and then he would call him back, and then he would say, okay, take away the plague and I will let you go out. He would never give them the freedom that they were going for. I'll let you go out, but you can't take the women and children. Or I'll let you go out, but you can't take the livestock. Or, he kept playing games of trying not to give what Moses was asking for, while stopping the plagues. And so, now his son is dead. And in that ancient Egyptian culture, Pharaoh was kind of a low-level god, a low-level deity. He was a human that the gods made a deity when he took the throne. So what you have is like the killing of a deity to be a killing of the king in waiting, someone who was supposed to have a divine presence, a divine appointment to rule Egypt. And that divine appointment would be given to him by the Egyptian gods. So now that guy's dead, and turns the whole country into turmoil. So Pharaoh calls Moses and tells him, fine, take your people, take your cattle, take everything you own, get out of my land. And so Moses does that. And then Pharaoh changes his mind and he tries to go in and kill them. And as they were crossing the Red Sea, you've probably heard the famous story, the seas part. Actually, it probably doesn't look like any of the movie portrayals that I've seen of it, because the seas didn't part immediately when you look at it. There was a wind that blew all night, and it's, took all night to part the waters and dry out the land so that they could cross. And so, like, the wind was parting the waters, and they cross on dry land. Pharaoh's mad, gets his soldiers, tries to go out and stop them, and as they're crossing the Red Sea to try and stop them, the Hebrew people get to the other side, the waters come in and kill everybody. And now they are going to have, they have certain commands. They're going to establish a new covenant, the Mosaic covenant. And so this is the important part. It's in Genesis 19, verses 5 through 6a. It says, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So this is important. This is a thing that's going to come back up. The Hebrew people now are supposed to be a holy nation, a nation set apart from all the other nations, and a kingdom of priests. That means that each person in there is supposed to have a responsibility to service to God, to represent God to people that weren't Hebrews. And so this isn't like a call. I mean, they end up having a priesthood, because you have the Aaronic priesthood that is formed shortly after this. So this priesthood of the nation of Israel is like a broad priesthood. Within that broad priesthood, you do have another priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood. But it's a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And remember this, because this is going to come up later in one of the later videos. So the whole purpose of this nation is to represent God to all the other nations, to kind of be God's shining light on the earth, to draw all those other nations to him. And Daniel Block, Old Testament scholar, he says this. He says, Yahweh, the divine king, had chosen Israel to function as his courtiers, and through their priestly ministry to extend his reign and realm to the ends of the earth. So this is kind of a divine calling. We don't. Well, if you're most Protestants don't have priests per se. We have pastors. Some of them, I think, do have bishops. When you look at the Catholic, Orthodox, and Anglican churches, they definitely have priests and like different levels of priesthood, bishops, archbishops, things like that. So, and those higher churches have that. But most Protestant churches, kind of low church Protestants, which is kind of where I'm from on this, we don't have that. We have local pastoral staff and an elders board, and you might have a lead pastor, and he's, kind of the most influential out of that group, and they kind of govern the church. And some, like Baptist circles where, I'm going to a Baptist seminary now, and I've been to a Baptist church. Used to be a member of Baptist churches, but they have like that low level hierarchy. The individual church operates on its own, kind of independent of the other ones. They kind of get to pick and choose who they associate with. Well, in this country, like there's this whole priestly hierarchy within the whole country. So you would have like a group of priests, and above them you might have another priest, and above that you would have a high priest. And you have that, by the time, definitely by the time that the end of, by the time of Jesus, you have a high priest that's in power and well connected, both with more of kind of in the place of a king in a sense, almost, except they did have a king even then. So God institutes two things for this covenant. He institutes the Sabbath. So every 7 days was the Sabbath to God. This is Exodus 28 through 11. And every year was a Sabbath year. Sabbath is kind of, it means seven. And so every 7 days is a day of rest. Every 7 years is a year of rest. Right, so that's what you do. It's Saturday. That's why even pious Jews today, they have strict rules of rest that they follow on Saturday, as far as what they can cook, how much they can cook on Saturday, because they're supposed to get everything cooked for that Saturday done on Friday before sundown. And then how far they can travel, what kinds of things they can do. So there's restrictions, and those restrictions, to us, they sound burdensome. But really the intent was to give them a day of rest. And that's what God says, and it's connected to creation. God says, on the seventh day, I rested. So on the seventh day, you will rest. And so you have this pattern of seven. Then when we got to the Sabbath year, which is explained in Exodus 23, every seventh year, if you were a farmer, owned a field, you were not supposed to harvest the crops. You let the land rest. So the land worked for 6 years by producing, of course, it's the farmers and the people he's hiring to go out there and, till the soil and plant the seed and, do all the things that you do to make crops grow. Make sure it's watered, make sure that everything's going the way it's supposed to. And then harvest time, you come in and harvest. Well, you don't go plant seed, and when the harvest comes up, any harvest that does come up, you don't go and collect it. You leave all of that there. And that's to let the land rest. And then after you have 7 Sabbath years, which is 49 years, on the 50th year, you're supposed to have a Jubilee year. And you find that in Leviticus 25. Now, the Jubilee year is something odd. I've kind of thought about this because a lot of what goes on in the Bible, as far as government and economics and stuff like that, doesn't really fit well in our 21st century American culture, American politics. It's something different, in large part because it's different times, right? Governments today do not work the same as they did then. So the Sabbath year, all loans, well, actually, on every 7th year, all loans were forgiven, right? So imagine doing that today. It wouldn't fly today. Every 7th year, every Sabbath year, all loans were forgiven. And then after that Sabbath year, you go into Jubilee year. All land that was sold, because as you're going in, stuff happens, you can't afford your rent, or stuff happens, you own land, but you need to pay off some debt over here, or for whatever, you sell off part of the land, right? And one of the things that happens in the Exodus that goes through is the land gets divided up according to family. And so whatever land was bought and sold was supposed to return to the original family holder. So if the person that sold it uh, had died, that land still went back to his son or his grandson, so that the land stayed in the family. And the purpose of that was a way to keep people from being perpetually enslaved to debt. Like, you knew that at that Jubilee year, that any debt cycle that had developed, in those 49 years prior, was going to be broken by the Jubilee year, because at least the land would go back. And, every 7 years the debt's forgiven. So that keeps kind of a situation of perpetual debt that's just getting passed down to generation to generation to generation. And it becomes so big that the sons and the grandsons and the great grandsons can't work their way out of it. But when you come to that Sabbath year, it stops all that. And so these are the ordinances in the covenant that's supposed to do this. And this is a pattern that you see. It's part of the pattern of 7 that tends to come up from time to time. And so we've covered the Exodus, we've covered the Sabbath. Next time, let's take a look at the tabernacle, and we'll be taking a look at the tabernacle and the Day of Atonement. And I thank you for joining me. I hope that you tune in next time to see what I'm doing. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe, hit the like button, share, and on social media. And I hope God blesses you this week. Thank you.